Hello there. I'm selling a couple of radios on eBay. The Yaesu 690R and a 2 meters all band, a 290R, and the band was open this morning, so I was going to do a quick video. Blow me down. The band has just died. Isn't that blinking marvellous? That is the trouble with 6 meters. It's absolutely magic when it's open, but not open that often, is it? But there was contests this morning and they were romping in from everywhere. Absolutely fantastic. So while I got the cameras set up and waiting for that to come open up, if it will, I thought I'd show you what I purchased this morning. I went to a boot sale and I found that, and I gave the lady £1 for it. It's in a box and I absolutely fell in love with it. If I can get in close enough, I need my magnifying glass here. Hang on, what do we got? Twickenham Economic Electric Company, England. There's a little plaque there. Does it show it up? Yeah, it might do. This is a telegraph receiver. Very old telegraph receiver. As Morse would be sent at the other end with a key, this would rattle away at the receiving end. All this would be brass, or is brass, as is all the terminals. This would be all polished, and I thought that would make an ideal candidate for restoration, but I don't know, sometimes you can over restore these things, and I mean, there's a lot of repos and this sort of thing on the market. But this is something you'd probably see in a museum. Anyway, it'd be nice to find out a little bit more about it. Anyway, I'm going to resist the temptation of polishing all this up. I think it would cheapen the whole thing. Anyway, it's just a little novelty that can go on the shelf. Certainly worth £1. I love anything like this. Okay then, well, while I'm waiting for 6 meters to open up, if it does, hopefully, I'll do a quick waffle on roses. Some of you shown some interest on roses, because I mentioned I worked for a rose growers many years ago, and if my memory serves me right, I'll try and recall some of it. Things may well have changed drastically now, but as I say, I'm going back nearly 50 years. But I worked for a very large grower that exported all over the world. There was many staff, many acres and fields of rose growing. They won many awards, and I was privileged to be part of some of this. And it was jolly hard work, I might add. Back-breaking work, a lot of it, but things have been mechanised somewhat now. Anyway, in a nutshell, rose growing, roses. I've mentioned the different types of roses, and you can find this on YouTube anyway. But most roses are grown or grafted, budded, onto briar stock. I'll refer to it as stock from now on, but it's a briar family, a very vigorous, fast growing, and it's grafted on at sort of ground level, and the idea being is once the bud is established, you then have a rose on top and a briar root system below. And we used to rotate the fields to save disease and problems. 2-year cycle, the crop would be moved around the farm, and the fields would be used for wheat and corn in between. And basically what was done is we had a gang of about 13, I think. 6 would sit with their backs to the tractor, sitting on a very low trailer, I suppose, and the seat you sat on was about 6 inches from the ground, if that, and you sort of bent over with your knees bent, and in between your knees there was a couple of wheels, cast iron wheels, that sort of shape, roughly drawn, okay, about 10 inches by about 2 or 3. And in front of these wheels that ran along the ground, there was a sort of what we called a mole, which was a tine, which was it went into the cultivated soil. I made a furrow, and then a guy behind you handed you a small piece of stock, 6 inches high, if that, upside down, and you took it from behind your shoulder, and as you brought it down, it came the right way up, and you placed it between these wheels, which are slowly going round. And the action of these wheels bedded the plant in the ground, planted it in other words. And so there were 6 of you doing this, and 6 supplying you, and 1 driving the tractor. You probably think the tractor driver had the best job, but that was the most boring of all. It took half a day to reach the end of a field going so slowly, and it looked an awful long way away the edge of the field. So you should take it in turns. Health and safety would have gone bananas over this, but I mean, I'm going back a bit. And the whole thing was covered over when it was raining or horrible. Anyway, that planted our stocks, and depending on how quick you were or how you paid attention, you know, the idea was to make them evenly spaced every couple of foot or so. But if it was a bit slow off the mark, then you couldn't slow the tractor down for 1 person. Anyway, I digress. Anyway, after this plant was established, I mean, it had to be hoed and looked after. But months later, when it was fully established and growing to about, I don't know, 2 foot off the ground, then along came a crew of 6 again, grafting the buds in. Here's a piece of rose, and I just pulled off the thorns, saved my hands, thank you very much. If I pull these away, where I pulled it away, you'll see there's little buds. Okay, there's a little bud there. Yeah, you got it. And with a small knife, I haven't got the eyesight now, but a small knife, you cut a sliver or cut that bud away. I've pre-done one because, as I say, the eyesight isn't that good. And there's a little bud. Wrong way up, look. There's a little bud. Let's try it again. There's a little bud. There, that's it. You've got it. And the stock at ground level, I'll use this piece of coax cable. That's the stock growing out of the cable. I'm using this because it's easy to show. And the grafters or budders would come along, and they'd put a small T-piece, a T-cut, across and down, making a T-cut. Don't know how well that shows. And that was opened up one way and the other way, like that. This is bark on the stock. It's at ground level. And they used to have little pruning knives, and that end was often bone, so as to ease that away. And then your little bud would be slid in that slot, says he. I've never slotted coax before. I've never budded coax before. This is got to be a first, folks. Anyway, I won't cheat. I'll do it. Okay, it's sort of gone in there. That'll do. The bud is now in the coax, the stock in other words. And then 6 guys would come along behind with raffia around their waist, and they'd be bending down as well, and they'd wrap raffia around this to bind it, to hold it tight, to stop it drying out, and tie that off. And in a few weeks this would grow out through the raffia, and you'd have a rose plant. Now that's the reason that you have a slight dog leg in roses. And this particular part, which would be at ground level or just above, is called the crown. Now anything growing from the crown is a rose, but anything growing below the crown is no longer a rose, that's your original stock. And you will sometimes get rogue things come up, very occasionally, which is part of the old stock. And those we call suckers, and they were cut off and discarded because they'd come to nothing. This is very back-breaking work and hard work, and because this was done on a large commercial scale, we was always looking for ways to reduce the amount of work, obviously, because there was thousands of these things. And we came up with a, well, we didn't come up with, but they bought towards the end, I seem to remember, a sort of a little 1.5 inch rubbery latex patch with a little staple at one end, and you sort of put the patch around this, stretched it round and pushed the staple in the back, saved you having to do all the wrap here. I don't know what they were called, but I know what we used to call them. Anyway, okay, so I hope you're using your imagination. So this is in the ground, like so, and this is now starting to grow, and it's 3 or 4 inches high, bright red shoots coming up, very soft, easily knocked off. And then gangs would come along afterwards with long handles, croppers, and we would cut that. Yeah, you shouldn't use these for cutting coax, but I've just done it. They were cut off, and all this was carted away on a trailer, and this would grow on to be your rose plant. Now each of these buds would be a different variety or a different colour, so all the rows had to be marked. It was very labour intensive. So there's our rose tree. So we come to pruning. Well, here, if I don't stab myself, is 1 year's growth. It's one continuous year's growth, and there's a little bud behind every one, look. So you can see how many plants you can get from this. So that's the reason we prune these things, because if we didn't, we'd have this growth, and we'd have that growth grow out of that, and then another growth grow out of that, and in absolutely no time at all, the plant would be in a tangled mess. It would be top heavy, it would produce fewer and fewer, smaller and smaller flowers, and well, it's totally useless. So when it comes to pruning, Felcos. Now you've just seen me use them. I shouldn't have abused them, but you've just seen me use it on coax, and I can assure you this is really heavy coax with a solid. Anyway, just shows how good they are. There's only one pair of secateurs, Felcos, Swedish, Switzerland, Felcos. There are, full stop, there's no others. To give you an indication, there's a lot of repos out there, same colour. They look pretty identical, but you can tell the real ones because, like this, they last 50 years, even if you do what I just done. The imitations don't, so they're not that much expensive to the cheap ones. So, providing you don't leave them out to get them rusty, or someone pinches them, or if you lost them, that's lasted me a lifetime. I've just touched the edge up of a blade occasionally. Anyway, I'm not any connection with the company. I haven't got shares in them. But that's a good bit of advice. So I've explained why we prune them to keep them into shape, and we will reduce 2/3 of that at the very, very least. And what we're aiming for, how best to describe this? We're aiming for a nice shape. We are aiming for an open middle, like a wine glass. Very similar to pruning an apple tree. Some old chap told me once, if you can kick a football through an apple tree, you've probably done it right, boy. And this is the same thing, but we're not talking about kicking footballs, but an open middle. We don't want any crisscrossing growth. So when we come to prune, we want to prune to 1, 2 or 3 at most an outward growing bud. We want the thing to go outwards and not come inwards or to the side. And we would cut slightly at an angle, if that's the bud there. We would cut slightly at an angle there. And then our new growth will grow there next year. And then we do the same on the new growth the year after. Some of this will die back just a little bit, which is why I've left 3/4 of an inch, I suppose. And you want to angle that cut too, so that water doesn't lay on the top. So we use secateurs for pruning. Any leaves that have got disease or something, we cut off. And we cut off dead wood, and really heavy dead wood we would use a pruning saw. If you've got disease and you've used these and the pruning saw, then before you go to the next plant, these want a rinse and some disinfectant. If not, you'll transfer the disease to the next plant. Have I covered some of it? Well, some of it is a massive subject, of course. If you're going for show, floribundas, you might not be quite so hard on them. But for perfection, what I've described as far as I can remember it. Climbing roses, you just sort of keep them in control, because you actually want those to climb, but they'll get away from you if you're not careful. Any roses that haven't been pruned for years, it's a devil of it. It's an expert to get them back, and it takes years to get them back. And the answer is to treat them right in the first place. Anyway, that's given you some indication of the work that goes in and the appreciation of roses. And I haven't touched on the subject of breeding. A lot of work was done in greenhouses, and pollen was taken from one flower with a feather and applied to another flower, and it wasn't 2 or 3 years till you found out what the results were. And for every mediocre result you got, there was several hundred of complete failures. You may well have been trying for a different colour, a shape, some property that it had, a scent, whatever. It is a really big subject, and I've only just touched on it. And when I re-watch this, I'll realise I've missed out an awful lot. I wish I'd have said something. Anyway, I'm now going to find out if 6 metres has opened up again. See you later.